probably seen pictures of the brain, and it just looks like a lumpy, bumpy blob like that. And it has sort of a little knob on the end. I'm drawing it exaggerated, but there's something sort of drawn on the back. And then coming down, I'll draw it cut off. There's this brain stem, we call it. So, what do all these things do, and is there more to it? This top part, the squiggly, it's just all folded up and looks kind of gross. That's that part. The top part is called the cerebrum, cerebrum, or the cerebral cortex is the very outside, the surface, the part next to the skull that you can touch. And this is all about the higher brain functions and critical thinking and imagination and that kind of very human, artistic qualities are all out here. And then this part in the back is called the cerebellum, so called because it looks like a cerebellum. It looks like a little brain, the ellum, I guess. So it's the little knob on the back, and that's all about motor skills. I'll just write that quickly. Motor, and then the brain stem just carries everything to the body for the most part. There's more to it kind of up in here. The hidden things that you can't really see are usually all about critical life functions. It's called the reptilian brain. I don't really want to write that, but the outer part is the mammalian brain out here, and then the reptilian brain is closer to the brainstem because that evolved first in the evolutionary line, and this is just responsible for, the core parts are responsible for things like keeping you breathing and keeping your heart running, that kind of stuff. And then, like I said, the outside part is more superfluous, not as necessary things. So if you receive a blow to the head, one way that we figure out what things are for is when someone gets hurt. We can see what damage that has. So if someone takes a hit to the back of the head, we've noticed that that affects their visual sense. The visual, or occipital, is the technical name of the lobe. Occipital. Okay. So that's the occipital lobe, or the visual cortex, or, on the back of the head. So that's one way that we figure out what things are for in the brain. And also, if we stimulate with electrodes, if we during brain surgery, the patient is still awake because the brain doesn't have any pain nerves. So the surgeon can go in with a little electrode and prod different areas and see, if they poke this area, maybe the patient will say, "I hear music," or if they poke over here, the patient might say, "Oh, it smells like my third grade classroom," or or "I hear my teacher's voice," or maybe if you poke in the right area, maybe their arm will just raise straight up in the air, their left arm, or something like that. So individuals have these very specific areas that correspond to sensations or to movements, but in general, we can't generalize these things to all people. We sort of have an area in the middle that's associated with sensation and motor skills for the most part, but really the specific things don't transfer from brain to brain. Only kind of major things like this being the vision, and up in the front is the frontal lobes, which is sort of just a term used for surgery, I think. But the frontal lobe is, I guess, more associated with critical thinking than the rest of it. And then on the side, pick a good color, we have the temporal lobe, which, it might not be like a lobe like you're thinking, something hanging off the brain or a bulge, but it's just a section of it that's by your ears, or the temple of your glasses. You have the eyepieces, and that's called the temple because it goes on this part of your brain, or this part of your head. And this is associated with hearing, which I guess I'll write down. Hearing. So as far as the surface of the brain, that's all we kind of have. And I said that that the motor skills are here, and I said this is all about how you move. So it's kind of shared responsibilities. Maybe the front of the brain will make a decision. It'll say, I need to run because, well, let's start from the beginning. The eyes see something. Maybe they see a predator, something about to eat you, and then it sends a message. I'll use blue for messages. It sends a message to the visual cortex, but the eye doesn't interpret it as a lion or whatever. It just sees some light, and then it sends it back here, and it says, oh, it looks like maybe it's a tiger, and then it sends it up to the front of the brain with the decision making, and then it makes the decision that yes, it is a tiger, and I need to run away from it. So it sends the message here that says run in this direction or whatever. And then, the message to run is sent back here, and then this says, okay, time to move the legs, time to, get running, and that sends it down to your legs. So it's hard to make a distinction of, where's the part of your brain that tells you to run. It's all being processed by different things. So one way to distinguish one thing from another is on the inside of the brain we've got the thalamus. I don't really know what it looks like, but it's in there right near the brainstem where it won't be touched because it's important. And this redirects information from the senses. Signals come up the brainstem as well as down, and then the thalamus redirects. So it's sort of the traffic cop of the brain. It gets something that looks like a vision thing. It might come from here and go over to the visual cortex, and the thalamus is what decides that. Let's see, what else is in this little brain, or the reptilian brain, the gray matter, I guess. All right, gray matter. So the gray. Oh, I'm sorry. The gray matter is the outside part, the not as important. That's what we call the gray matter, and then the white matter is the very deep part. I want to make sure I get that right. So when people talk about exercising your gray matter or something, that's the doing puzzles or whatever is exercising your gray matter, and then the white matter is deep inside, and surgeons won't touch it, and you really don't want to have any problems in your white matter. Let's see. Also inside there, I guess I'll put the hypothalamus, which is named that because I think it's a small version of the thalamus, or hypothalamus. It looks like a small version of the thalamus, but actually they found out it serves a different purpose. The hypothalamus is a lot of those vital functions that we talked about. It's, heart rate, I'll put BPM. I can't write BPM, close enough. And your temperature and how you're breathing, and it just keeps track of all your basic functions. And then there's the amygdala. A-M-Y. Oh, let's see. Amygdala, which is associated with fear. And the way that we figure these things out is, I guess you could stimulate it and say, oh, the person experiences fear, but it's the white matter. It's the really important stuff, so we don't want to go poking it. And also for the higher level stuff, a lot of the ways we figured this out is with a PET scan, a PET for positron emission tomography, which we don't need to get into detail. But what it does is it produces a picture of the brain that's, let's see, there's the two lobes of the brain, and then it has sort of green areas of higher activity, and inside the green areas might be yellow areas, and that shows where literally where the blood is flowing in the brain, but that's believed to be associated with what's being most active. So we show the person, a picture, and we see that it really lights up in the back of the brain, if that's the back, and that's how we, kind of figured out the occipital lobe also, or how we confirmed it. And then, amygdala fear, we can, I don't know, tell them they're dying or something. That might not be ethical, but if they're experiencing fear, we know that certain areas of it light up. So, let's see, more parts. Well, okay, one thing that's important to know is if you're looking down at the brain, I'll talk about brain structure at the same time. Another way to figure out what the brain is structured like is to do an MRI, which usually gives kind of a black and white image of the brain, and we'll say this is a top-down view also of the two hemispheres. And then the part in the middle here, I'll draw it white, I don't know what color it shows up, the part connecting the right and left part of the brain, the right and left hemispheres, is called the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum, sorry. So, that can actually be cut for if a person is having a lot of seizures. One way to treat that is to cut the corpus callosum. And it's interesting what happens when you separate the right and left halves of the brain. They can't talk to each other anymore, and it seems like that would be a really bad thing for the individual. But actually, in most cases, they turn out just fine. Only under very specific laboratory things, like they show you a picture of something over here in this field of your view, and then they ask you what it was, and you can't describe it, but you're able to draw it, like you can reproduce it. I don't know which side it is or whatever, but I just think it's interesting what happens when you cut the corpus callosum and separate the right and left halves of the brain. So, there you go. That's your one-page summary of what's in the brain.